One of the ways that universities suppress free speech and critical thinking is by using policies and codes of conduct to limit academic freedom and dissenting opinions. These policies and codes of conduct are often disguised as anti-harassment or diversity measures, but they actually restrict the expression of ideas that might challenge the dominant views or offend certain groups on campus. According to the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, FIRE, a non-profit organization that defends civil liberties in higher education, 88% of colleges in the U.S. have restrictions on free speech. More than a quarter of institutions in the report, 28.5%, received FIRE's poorest, red light rating for maintaining speech codes that both, clearly and substantially, restrict freedom of speech. Speech codes are regulations that prohibit certain types of speech that are deemed hateful, offensive, or intolerant. They often target speech based on race, color, religion, ethnicity, disability, sex, age, or sexual orientation. However, these codes are vague and broad, and they can be used to silence any speech that challenges the status quo or criticizes the administration. For example, at Emory University, students complained after they found chalk messages scrawled around campus voicing support for Donald Trump in 2016. The university president responded by saying that he would review and revise the policies on chalking and respect for open expression. At Smith College, a student sit-in blocked media from entering unless reporters agreed to explicitly state support for the movement in their coverage. At UCLA, students protested against a policy statement on intolerance that they thought did not go far enough to protect against anti-Semitism. These examples show how speech codes can create a chilling effect on speech and stifle intellectual diversity and debate. They also violate the First Amendment rights of students and faculty at public colleges and universities, which are bound by the Constitution. Private institutions, in contrast, are not subject to these decisions, but they still have a moral obligation to uphold academic freedom and free inquiry. Speech codes are not only unconstitutional and unethical, but they are also ineffective and counterproductive. They do not prevent harassment or discrimination, but they may create resentment and hostility among different groups. They do not promote tolerance or diversity, but they may foster conformity and groupthink. They do not educate or enlighten, but they may indoctrinate and censor. Therefore, universities should abolish speech codes and respect the right of everyone to express their opinions freely and peacefully. They should encourage open dialogue and critical thinking among students and faculty of different backgrounds and perspectives. They should protect academic freedom and dissenting opinions as essential elements of higher education and democracy. Universities are supposed to be places where free speech and critical thinking are valued and encouraged. However, in recent years, there has been a growing trend of universities suppressing free speech and critical thinking in the name of diversity, inclusion, and social justice. In this section, we will explore how universities foster a culture of conformity and groupthink that discourages critical thinking and intellectual diversity. One of the ways that universities suppress free speech and critical thinking is by imposing speech codes and policies that restrict what students and faculty can say or write on campus. These policies often prohibit speech that is deemed offensive, hateful, or harmful to certain groups or individuals, even if it is lawful and relevant to academic inquiry. For example, some universities have banned speakers who hold controversial views on topics such as immigration, gender identity, or climate change. Some universities have also punished students or faculty who express dissenting opinions or challenge dominant narratives on social or political issues. These policies create a chilling effect on free speech and academic freedom, as people fear being censored, sanctioned, or ostracized for expressing their views. Another way that universities suppress free speech and critical thinking is by promoting a culture of conformity and groupthink that discourages intellectual diversity and debate. Groupthink is a psychological phenomenon where people in a group tend to agree with each other and avoid dissent or conflict, even if it means ignoring evidence or rational arguments that contradict their views. Groupthink can lead to poor decision-making, biased reasoning, and intolerance of different perspectives. In universities, Groupthink can manifest in various ways, such as peer pressure. Students may feel pressured to conform to the prevailing opinions or values of their peers, especially if they belong to a minority group or face social stigma for their views. For example, some conservative or religious students may feel isolated or unwelcome in predominantly liberal or secular campuses. Echo chambers. Students may seek out information or sources that confirm their existing beliefs and avoid those that challenge them. This can create echo chambers where students are exposed to only one side of an issue and become more polarized and dogmatic in their views. Cancel culture. Students may engage in cancel culture, which is the practice of withdrawing support from or shaming people who have said or done something that is considered offensive or unacceptable by some groups. Cancel culture can create a climate of fear and intolerance where people are afraid to speak their minds or question popular opinions. These factors can undermine the development of critical thinking skills among students. Critical thinking is the ability to analyze information objectively, evaluate evidence logically, and form reasoned judgments independently. Critical thinking requires exposure to diverse viewpoints, open-mindedness, curiosity, and intellectual humility. However, when universities suppress free speech and critical thinking, they deprive students of the opportunity to practice these skills and learn from different perspectives. Instead of fostering a culture of inquiry and dialogue, they foster a culture of conformity and groupthink that discourages critical thinking and intellectual diversity. One of the main ways that universities suppress free speech and critical thinking is by censoring or punishing students and faculty who express unpopular or controversial views on campus or online. This section will explore some of the examples and consequences of this practice. Censorship is the act of suppressing or restricting speech that is deemed offensive, harmful, or inconvenient by some authority. Censorship can take many forms, such as banning speakers, canceling events, removing books, blocking websites, or disciplining individuals. Censorship violates the First Amendment to the Constitution, which protects speech no matter how offensive its content. Restrictions on speech by public colleges and universities amount to government censorship, in violation of the Constitution. Such restrictions deprive students of their right to invite speech they wish to hear, debate speech with which they disagree, and protest speech they find bigoted or offensive. Punishment is the act of imposing a penalty or sanction on someone for expressing a certain view or engaging in a certain activity. Punishment can also take many forms, such as expulsion, suspension, demotion, termination, harassment, intimidation, or defamation. Punishment can have a chilling effect on free speech and critical thinking, as it creates a climate of fear and self-censorship among students and faculty who may avoid expressing their opinions or challenging the status quo. Some examples of censorship and punishment in universities are, in March 2023, a Cornell University sophomore and member of the Undergraduate Student Assembly spearheaded a resolution that implores all instructors to provide content warnings on the syllabus for any traumatic content that may be discussed. The resolution was motivated by a friend who became visibly disturbed while reading The Surrendered, a Chang-Rae Lee novel with a graphic rape scene. Critics argued that the resolution would stifle academic freedom and intellectual diversity by discouraging professors from assigning challenging or controversial texts. In October 2017, supporters of white nationalist Richard Spencer and protesters clashed after a speech by Spencer at the University of Florida in Gainesville. The university had initially denied Spencer's request to speak on campus, citing safety concerns, but later relented after Spencer threatened to sue. The university spent $600,000 on security for the event, which was met with widespread opposition and disruption from students and faculty. In May 2017, GOP members of the Wisconsin legislature introduced a bill directing the UW system to draft a new policy on free expression to include punishments up to expulsion for any student who disrupts the free speech rights of others on campus in 2 separate instances. The bill was inspired by an incident in November 2016, when a group of protesters interrupted and heckled conservative commentator Ben Shapiro during his speech at UW-Madison. Supporters of the bill argued that it would protect free speech from violent or abusive protesters, while opponents claimed that it would infringe on the right to dissent and protest. In February 2023, the UK government announced new measures to protect free speech and academic freedom in higher education institutions. The measures include appointing a free speech champion to investigate potential breaches of free speech duties, imposing fines on institutions or student unions that fail to uphold free speech, requiring institutions to adopt a pro-free speech code of practice, and strengthening legal redress for individuals who suffer loss as a result of infringement of free speech.